The pep talk I always give to them is that, look, this is exactly China 2006, India 2016, when Modi demonetized the rupee. And whenever that happens in Pakistan with this 2026, I don't know if there's a pattern here. Economy is going to unlock, right? So this is the actual big market, and you're going to these other markets temporarily.
One of my cliches that I roll out in where I work most of my time is in Silicon Valley is I'll tell founders just because it's hard doesn't mean it's worth doing.
If he went to his parents who are retired, maybe have a home that they bought after retirement. I'm sure if he asked, I want to put this house as under mortgage to get the money, they would say yes. But it's unfair to ask your retired parents to put their house under mortgage to support you to do that. In venture, we solve for that.
In terms of governance, at what point do you think the early stage, the first leg of VCs or investors need to insist on certain governance levels? Like there has to be a balance, right? You can't just over-govern a company that's just very new, and you can't just let them free either.
You're not going to get external investors with two sets of books.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for making the time today, guys. We've done an episode on VC before. We had your other colleagues talk about venture capital. तो हमने कहा कि अब थोड़ा उसको expand करें और थोड़ी मतलब और depth से समझें VC को, because I think पाकिस्तान में क्योंकि entrepreneurial finance वैसे ही कम है, so this sector gets a lot of hate as well. There's a lot of expectations as well. So anyway, let's start the conversation because Ammar, let's start with you. You've recently entered this market,
Right.
So you have you're looking at it from the freshest set of eyes.
Right.
What made you make your first investment in Pakistan, or say Moment Ventures' first investment in Pakistan?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. So I've been connected to the Pakistani ecosystem. I grew up here. I've been in the States for all my professional life, but I've been connected to both the society and the tech ecosystem for the last few years. So I've been coming for a while. And for me, I think what was the most interesting thing was, I think venture is a micro business in that can you find a great team solving a big problem with a scalable solution? And that's what I saw when I'm invested in Farmdar. I did a round there last year. And I guess that's what it came down to is I'm trying to put a global lens on what I'm doing. Okay, ye jo team hai, ye log hain, can they raise money? Can they be successful globally? And that's what I saw. That's the opportunity I saw with Farmdar. And I guess some of it may be a little bit personally driven. And well, I'm at a point where I want to do most things in Pakistan myself. So it was a combination of the classic incentives of personal, professional, and I think a chance to build a quality business. That's what got me here.
But you guys have deployed almost full funds in Pakistan as well, right? So in your opinion, before we come to your own portfolio and all, what is the market? What are you learning so far? What is the market looking like to you guys now after having पूरी एक cycle हो गई, एक पूरा fund deploy कर लिया? Start with Faisal. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's I always keep talking about macros and cycles, so I'll go back to that because to me, it's all you have to ride those waves in Pakistan. Frontier market economies like Pakistan, especially net importers of energy, you have to keep an eye that when the dollar gets strong and energy prices go up, it always causes a rollover, right, in our economy. And also we have structural issues, the import imbalance because we import most of our energy. So the second the economic growth starts, like we're about to ramp up again, as interest rates come down, you see this pump, things start to grow, momentum builds, energy consumption goes up, import bill again expands, and you're rollover, right? So it's that roughly 3-year, 18 to 36 month cycle that you have to kind of plan for. So if I look at this cycle, I think things are going to pump up again, probably not to the 2021 level. That was like a bit of an anomaly similar to the dot-com bubble, 2001. Again, it was based on a similar type of patterns. But I do think that what you'll probably see is more investors like Ammar coming in like versus being just the first check, coming into that gap now. The companies that have actually survived for the last 2 years showed their tenacity. A lot of our common portfolio companies that have figured out that, hey, we can actually, not just when there's free money coming, we can actually build a real business even in tough times, right? Because ultimately, there are business cycles and founders have to learn to become businessmen. So I think that's the difference this time around. you're going to see different types of investors enter. And I'll add this as well. That I think in 21, what happened was that a lot of investors that came in, especially foreign investors, it was almost like a FOMO, like herd mentality, where it was the perception was that, hey, this could be a mini India or the next Malaysia. So they were investing from their 10% opportunistic allocation. So they didn't necessarily have mandates for Pakistan. And that's what created that spike in funding. I know there was times in deals where we were like surprised. And that's when I actually slowed down investing, where pre-seed safes started getting caps of $10 million.
Yeah.
It's, that was the time we started pulling out. I think you guys went
That's
along
a
with
good
us.
time to just sit outside
Exactly.
and just watch.
It's like plots, right?
Entry point matters, right? It really
100%.
matters more than anything else. There's only 2 points that really matter on the return side: is the entry point and the exit point.
Exactly.
But how was 2021 cycle in the Valley?
We have the same dynamics there. Over there, it's a much deeper and broader market. There's always people investing in ventures. So I always break it down by what stage of fund are you, what stage of company hai. Because the seed companies, there's a lot of seed companies right now trying to make it through that next phase of that Series A. If you're a Series A company, you have money in the bank, then you're trying to make sure you're delivering the growth so that you can get the B done. If you're a growth company, you're trying to make sure that you can justify this unicorn valuation that you raised at. So every company has a different challenge. And Silicon Valley is blessed by being this capital of the tech industry, right? So with this AI wave, that is the flavor of the month. You're seeing it play out, though, in interesting ways, because unlike this is post 21, there's been a huge amount of funding of anointed winners, right? So there's less broad investing right now because it's such an uncertain time. The AI landscape, it changes in 12 months because there's so much innovation. So it's different now than pre-21. I think it's a very exciting time, but it's a very risky time in tech investing right now in the US, just because things are changing so fast. Selling pickaxes, we talked about that when we got together for coffee. Selling pickaxes are great, but which pickaxe? In some ways, that's sort of one of the questions to think through as well.
NVIDIA is the pickaxe, right?
But how much NVIDIA can anybody own? At this point.
Yeah.
So,
Hey man, people that bought it in 2020.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was my biggest miss.
right.
At least to ride the bubble.
Right, exactly. At least right the bubble.
Yeah.
Whether it's fundamentals or not, I don't care. I would have probably not been here. I've been on an island somewhere. People have made like $100,000-$200,000 that they put in like back in like 2018, 19. Like walked away with like 10, 15 million. It's like insane.
But that happened like 3 days ago with Trump meme coin.
Yes.
By the way, people have made a
270%
killing.
return in a day.
Someone was telling me about how they just missed out and they only made $2 million. And their friend who invested $1 million walked away
With less.
with 75.
Yeah, because FOMO.
It's crazy.
Like it's insane, like the amount of money people have made. But I think then
It's the younger kids, by the way.
Yeah.
My analyst did. It's something similar with like $10,000 borrowed from his parents and like made like I don't know 1.2 million. Not just here, like previously investing in like all the 10,000 other cryptos. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's like
Speculative markets, but if you get it right,
I mean, my brain short circuits there. Unless there's a thesis, I can't. It doesn't make any sense.
Sahi baat hai, bilkul. So Naiel, on the Fatima Gobi front, so you've deployed your entire first fund, right? How was 2021 for you guys? Even in terms of, because I feel like part of you guys were also raising the fund at that point, right? Or you had just finished the raise?
We had just deployed. We started raising in 2023.
No, that's fund 2. Like I'm talking about fund 1.
Oh, fund 1, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So fund 1 we closed in June of 2020.
Okay.
So we were deploying in 2021.
Okay.
And again, like Faisal mentioned, that we were getting priced out very quickly with the foreign capital that was coming inside. And, it was difficult to then kind of manage the valuation that we wanted to come in. And coming back to the point that we just made, that it's that entry point that matters so much. And I think that is something that we're seeing different now, is that at least the correction has not happened to the extent that we think it needs to happen, but at least the discussion or the valuations are going in the right direction. And in Pakistan now, at least you can get those entry points to then be able to justify the venture returns and to be able to justify venture funding going into a company. So I think that kind of mismatch of supply demand has now just trying to reach that equilibrium, and that's something that we're really excited about because I think in the next 10 years, your previous question, how do you see Pakistan and how we see it? I think the question we ask is, in the next 10 years, how do you see digitization in Pakistan? And I think the numbers that we are seeing now loudly scream that digitization is going to only increase. It's going to be a bigger part of your life. So, keeping that in mind with, I think, getting the right value entry points and the learnings from 2021, not only just what happened in Pakistan, but I think also globally. We also feel that now the investors, when they come in, they will perhaps rely at least on us giving them some sort of sense on what really the pricing should be.
That's very interesting though, right? Because of course those valuations are not going to make sense, and we'll come to that as well. But on the digitization front, so how are you guys seeing this as an opportunity? Like, I know you have a more Pakistan focused fund, you do not, and I think all of your Pakistan investments will be more opportunistic. Right. So how do you see, say, the opportunity in Pakistan to make venture returns? So let's start with Ammar and then we'll go to Faisal.
Yeah, look, I think it's the nice thing about venture capitalists is everybody has their own opinion. So entrepreneurs get to choose who they resonate with as well and what they like. I think the opportunities for me that I'm going to enjoy looking for and finding, I hope, is ones where you can have a chance to build a strong core business in Pakistan, but the products you build can be applied internationally and globally that are attractive to customers, that have fundamental value for them. Because in the end, export earnings matter. Software is a great thing to export. Yeah. And if you build with the right perspective and the right customer experience in mind, the right customer quality in mind, you should be able to build a global product, right? And I think that's what's exciting to me. Looking at it, I see talent, I see entrepreneurial energy. There's a lot of resilience. We've talked about that already. And I think that shows up in the quality of the companies. The question is, what are you seeking to build? So digitization matters to me because it improves people's experiences. But what also really matters to me is entrepreneurs who are thinking about building with the right perspective of the endpoint, what they're building for, and the customer set that they're building for. I guess, and the other thing is I used to do M&A. I've sold companies, taken companies public, and that experience has been great for me. But in the end, we're also in the exits business because if we don't have entry points are great, we got to have exit points too. Yeah. And so for me, that sort of flavors my thinking as well. And Pakistan's a vibrant economy, but it is also a cyclical economy that has really deep ups and downs. Yeah. So trying to think through that, for me, international companies are a way to mitigate that risk while still building a great business. So I'm trying to, and building something that's attractive to buyers because 80 or 90% of venture exits are acquisitions. So you have to have a product, and companies are products that people will buy, and that's really important. I mean, to me, in that sense, right?
But when you think about, say, something that's attractive to buyers, what does that mean? Like in the sense that there is another big company that does the same thing and would just want to add it. So I think the best example from Pakistan for this is Cloudways, right? That it was a massive exit and it just aligned with DigitalOcean and their strategy as well.
Yeah, look, it mattered. There are different reasons for people buy things, but ultimately big companies buy startups for something that they can add value to. They're not stupid, right? So they say, look, you have X. If I combine it with my Y, I can get a very big Z, right? In the sense that it's additive and it's something that fits into my business, whether it's technology, customer base, channel, it can really depend. Okay. So I think Cloudways was a great example. They obviously, for DigitalOcean, were a great way for them to compete with other cloud providers and make it easier for SMEs to use the cloud. It made perfect sense to that global customer base with a great technology set and solution to go do that. So it varies by company, but ultimately you have to be thinking about something that in a corporate boardroom or in an acquisition committee, people can sort of say, by buying this, I'm buying a good asset, but I'm buying something I can make more valuable when it's inside my company. So it has to fit somehow. Does that make sense? I mean, it has to align some way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
So Faisal, how do you think the opportunity in Pakistan, right? After you've invested, most of your companies are focused on Pakistan. So from BookMe to others. So how do you see the opportunity in Pakistan, especially after deploying the first?
So I echo 100% what Ammar is saying. I agree 100% on that. I have a slightly, I'm very bullish on Pakistan on a long-term horizon. And as Naiel said earlier, I think we're in the exponential adoption stage of technology. So the build-up that started in the 1995, that adoption curve is going to peak somewhere in the 2030s. So, and Pakistan is now in that leapfrog era. Just like if you remember when in the 70s, 80s, people would wait for to get a telephone connection at the house from PTA, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they used to have something called public call offices. And then I went off to college, came back, and suddenly there was a whole GSM and cell phone revolution. And when I came back, even the fruit stand guy had a cell phone, right? And so that leapfrog, especially when your infrastructure is lagging, I think that's going to take place in Pakistan in payments and pretty much across the board from technology. So from my perspective, a lot of my portfolio companies, as Ammar is saying, also I'm trying to diversify their in not just without thought, the ones where there's a gap in markets like the GCC markets like Saudi and UAE, to enter there and to diversify revenue at least by minimum 15%, dollarize it, if not 25%, because then that makes you attractive for foreign investors, and then you've got a separate market, right? It kind of hedges a bit as a business. So about 6 of them have already entered.
6 companies have now entered their second market. Okay, wow.
But again, these are like LAM, for example, is 50% dollarized, right? Just I mean that was by default, that was the case. BookMe's done it, Postex has done it, K-Trade has done it, Colabs just did it, and then 2-3 others I can't name, but they're in advanced stages of doing it. But again, these make sense for those that have a product that has a product market fit there. You can't just do it without thought, right?
Yeah.
So that's one element. But the pep talk I always give to them is that, look, this is exactly China 2006, India 2013, or in fact, no, 2016, when Modi demonetized the rupee. And whenever that happens in Pakistan, whether it's 2026, I don't know if there's a pattern here, I'm just just joking. But whenever that happens, this economy is going to unlock, right? So this is the actual big market, and you're going to these other markets temporarily, while because that's how you attract investors and to offset our debasement. And our debasement will be addressed whenever we decide to document our informal economy.
So so this is when you say demonetization could lead to that that uptick in the economy. It's entirely because your non-digital or say undocumented economy becomes documented. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So look, there's 2 schools of thought, right? So one is, look, if you just think, I'll think outside the box, and a lot of people may disagree with me, right? So we keep talking about GDP growth through productivity alone, right?
Yeah.
But this happened in India in 1990. If governance typically is not good anywhere. We're even seeing in developed markets, right? It's not human. That's just human nature in terms of how people govern, right? We always start off good, and then things end up not being well at the tail end of a cycle, and then things start up again. So in Pakistan's case, if you specifically look at us, we're like in 1990 India, when the population grew significantly, it got to that critical mass where governance was not that great, domestic industry was not that strong. They turned into a purely consumption-based economy, and then they became a closed economy and basically started, domestic manufacturing. Their real effective exchange rate actually came down, and the same thing, the kind of the environment we're in right now. And we've seen proliferation of all the product substitution domestically, right? So we have that issue right now. We're 250 million people. Governance was not that great, and really even our exporters were importing raw materials up to 30 to 40%, right? So weak currency doesn't help. But when you look forward, so let's say that's a structural reform that may take like 5-10 years to address, right? But now let's come to the informal economy. So if our GDP growth rate organically, because it's a frontier market, without doing much, you should be growing at 3 to 6%. If you can document just 3% of your informal economy, which in my belief, I think it's almost probably close to 600 billion, but I'll go with a more conservative number of another 350 billion, right? So if you can just document 3% of that through digital payments, and frankly, tech is digitization, is documentation, right? Like always give the example that if your declared income is 0 and your food panda bill, even if it's settled in cash, is 2 lakhs, you're caught. And someday it's going to come home to roost, right?
Yeah.
So that's documentation. So if we can just capture that, that'll leapfrog us, like the landlines to cell phones, into a larger economy. And so that's what you're really sitting and waiting for, right? And that's part of what the thesis is for this portfolio. Even though we're early stage in VC, we're patient capital. You build a position, you kind of, support them. You hang in there. You know how much support. We've almost turned a therapist in the last 2 years. So
That's definitely part of the job description.
it's so. In fact, I've needed therapy after that.
But let's not scare people from ordering online.
Look, it's an addiction. Just like you can't stop looking at those memes on Instagram. They can't. This is the beauty of technology. You lure people into the tech realm by creating efficiency, and once you're hooked,
then you can't go back.
I've talked, just to keep my own family and stuff like that. Certainly post-COVID, the e-commerce engine in Pakistan is not stopping.
Not stop.
It's not. It's like Instagram to conversion to in-house consumption is like a loop, right?
There's that meme now. So I was watching yesterday. There's this someone put up a WhatsApp voice notes thing where the mom is scolding the e-commerce store on WhatsApp कि आप ना भेजें इसके order. इसके हम order ना accept करें. All my daughter does is sit here and order from you guys.
But that's the magic of Mubariz, but that's also the magic of technology, right? That talking about scalability, it gives that person Larkana the opportunity to go buy a branded lawn ka joda sitting there, which perhaps maybe was a weekend trip. I'm not sure, but I'm just imagining it to be a trip that they took out there. Now that person can sit at the comfort of their home because of all the e-commerce goals. And now it's just not KLI, but all of Pakistan. Market. I mean, it's just amazing.
Even like the efficiency with the, like on the first of the month, all your domestic staff, the second you give the salary, they're all asked for chutti to go back to the villages to give the physical cash. Now, Easy Paisa, all the payment platforms, they've disrupted that, right?
Yeah, who'd have thought like the whole internal domestic remittance would be that big of a, I mean, it was like clearly Nadeem thought of it. Yeah.
By the way, that never even crossed my mind until I started seeing this and the numbers, and I was like, this is crazy.
It was purely just domestic remittance, right?
Moving money around, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but how's the portfolio doing so far? You guys have like each made what, 12, 13 investments each?
I've gone over.
I'm not counting your Shark Tank. We'll come to that.
No, fund 1 and 2.
Fund one.
This fund about 24, I think. Yeah, 24.
24. Wow. Okay.
We made 22 investments out of our first fund.
Okay. And so what's the report card like?
I think the report card, it's
early still.
Early stage. It's very relative. So I think we still have a mixed bag. We've got the great performers. We've got guys who still, working out what it is. I guess post the funding freeze, how they're going to manage their business. We've also had write-offs. So we've had a full scale, but I still think it's too early. The data that we have from Gobi shows us I think we're year 4. We still need a couple of 3-4 more years to really be able to tell who's who. And the Gobi guys keep telling us, it's the one you're not expecting that will end up doing the best. So to put a performance number on it, I don't think
still early.
It's still too early to do that. But
I think that's going to be Taza for us.
Yeah. Inshallah. And then
it's now called Zambil, right?
Zambil.
No, the founders are amazing. It's like the best, and their pivot
I keep hearing like everyone who's invested in them, they've just said कि यार बहुत ज़बरदस्त उनका है. The earlier thing didn't work, but they've pivoted into Zambil now. So you were saying, sorry.
So just to add, I think just to what we have seen from our portfolios and all the investment that Gobi has made, there's nothing kind of different about what's happening in Pakistan. It's not as if like what we see here is an anomaly or something very different. It's in fact, our portfolio seems to be doing very well compared to other regions at this life cycle. And like you said, it's kind of early stage, and I think we'll still wait another 4 years to really see, to give you a real report card.
Yeah, I don't know, of course.
Yeah.
But in terms of the things that did not work out, कुछ तो बंद हो गई ना. So what are the big learnings from there? Because, and this is something I like to ask Pakistani VCs all the time as well, and will bring your perspective in as well. But every time a startup fails in Pakistan, it's either incompetence or corruption, or someone they're just all everyone सब चोर हैं, VCs को कुछ पता नहीं है, वो पैसे उड़ा रहे हैं, वो ये कर रहे हैं. Now, have you guys experienced some of that in your portfolio, or have you guys experienced that like in the deals that you've seen? And what is it about like VC? And I feel like it's not just limited to Pakistan either. I saw that early stage India.
Theranos.
Yeah. But no, it's not like entire thing was
Goldman Sachs got duped. I'm like, if you look at the cap table, you're just like, dude. Or FTX.
E-fishery in Indonesia right now,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Turned out to be one of the biggest, and they have some blue chip investors over there. So how do you guys view that?
I would say that we view it that venture is a very new asset class in Pakistan.
Hmm.
So what is happening is, I think, and kind of we're kind of spearheading that process, all as kind of venture capitalists, is that we're educating the market, and it will take some time for everyone to understand that this is kind of part of the cycle. Maybe conventional businesses, you have the same practice. You may start a business, it doesn't do well. You may have some bad actors as well. But essentially, this is part of the ecosystem and the development of it. And you will see this in all different regions. And it's through this process, as the investors, as the founders, as the venture capitalists get educated, everyone learns to develop those best practices. And then all this kind of, all these kind of headlines that we hear or come across, let's say it may be failure, there'll be less stigma to it. And people will learn that this is part of the process. But I think what matters is at the end of the day, you have some great companies in your portfolio that you've invested in that perform well, that do well for the large ecosystem and for your portfolio as well. I think that's what matters in the long run.
Look, you guys are already talking about this a little bit because, and I'm glad to hear it, which is the time frame has to be long, right? If the entrepreneur thinks that raising a Series Seed or Series A is a win, they're going to start spending like it's a win. That's only a milestone on a journey that's much longer.
Yeah.
And if you guys continue to, or we all do, I'm a participant in this market too, keep that ambition focused on building a business on the long term and understanding that you're building the milestones along the way, then you'll have good actors, right? Because they're not looking at that capital coming in as something that they can live off or do something great for themselves, but it's about building, making sure you retain the oxygen to build a great business in the long term. So I think that's really good to hear, because I think if you have people,
in terms of governance,
Yeah.
At what point do you think the early stage, super early, the first check, VCs or investors need to insist on certain governance level? Like there has to be a balance, right?
Yeah.
You can't just over govern a company that's just very new, and you can't just let them free either.
Look, in our ecosystem where I am, it generally happens at the Series A. You create a board, you create a much more real scripted structure. We try to put in that discipline when we invest at the seed stage or pre-seed stage, even, is to have regular check-ins and have a cadence of reporting and understanding. And if it's operationally good, because then you actually have somebody who's looking with you at your business, but isn't in it every day, and is committed to your business, so you can have that continuity of discussions and progress understanding. As far as governance goes, I think the truth of it is, I'm sure we've had governance failures that I know or don't know about. The portfolio allows you to correct for that in the end, because you have a portfolio. If somebody really acts badly, you leave them for dead and you move on, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be this idea that you're backing people that have the right values, and they are being trained to think about it with the right perspective, both in short-term goals and long-term goals. And that creates a cycle of governance, right? Because you then build the company the way it's supposed to be built. So it's not a direct answer to your question about governance, but I think in the end, board meetings can be incredibly dull if you're talking about how they're doing in terms of their, ye plan tha, kitna stock diya, everything is within range or not. These kind of things can take on what you really want to feel. What's strategic for the business? Are we actually creating value? And in the end, it's the founder. One of the things I think that is something that Pakistan needs to continue to develop is mid-range management, right? Middle management, figuring out functional strength. When do you need to replace a head of sales? When do you need to figure out whether the CEO, the founder, is the right CEO? I mean, that's a very tough
Or
decision.
improve the UI UX.
Yeah, improve the UI UX, exactly. All sorts of things. They're hard questions to answer, and you need to develop to get there, right? So
our perspective on this is that we feel that you should, at least, even if it's a seed stage company, have the conversation on governance to just kind of set the stage,
right,
to let them know that, listen, as you build this company, have these things in mind, and have these things in mind because they will help you in managing your company as you scale. And if those right processes or that thought process is there from day one, when you scale, you can put those things in place and not and it'd be an easy journey for you, as opposed to then some sort of incident occurring or some investor coming in requiring that from you, and it makes you investor ready for larger funds that are looking at you as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
That you have those systems in place. They look at you, they understand, okay, He's thinking about how he's scaling this company, and like you said, it puts the right systems in place for the
I
company.
mean, look, and this is maybe this is to be more pointed to your question about governance in Pakistan. If the tech ecosystem stays smaller and collegial, or competitive and collegial, right? It's a cooperation model. If you and you we talked about this when we met. If you have bad actors who do things that are shameful,
Yeah.
that should not be done, and the market knows that, they shouldn't get funded again, right? And if the world, I mean, that's the way it should always be,
No one
right?
works with them
But
again,
in Pakistan, I sometimes feel like in regular business, it seems that you can do all sorts of things and continue. The tech ecosystem has a chance to do that better, I think. I don't know if you guys have more perspective
and
here.
you see, that is exactly what we're doing. Even on the governance structure, let's say, kind of putting the right reportings, making sure your audits are happening, make sure that there's no double bookkeeping.
Right.
Venture's really changing that in Pakistan, at least, right? You're building the foundation of the company, telling them that, listen, however you may have seen business be done, that's not it. Put these governance structures, put the reporting in line, and that hopefully will, inshallah, change how startups or early stage business in Pakistan are set up, and they go to success because they can then unlock great valuations and also capital
Right.
from external investors.
Right. I mean, you're not going to get external investors with two sets of books.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Right. We're kind of playing that, like they say, you want to change the world to venture. Like, we want to change Pakistan. So we're kind of doing venture.
Yeah.
And that's why greenfield makes more sense, right?
Right.
In terms of, I mean, when I moved back, I was looking at different stages of investments, right? So what I realized was that, even if you look at the stock market, like a lot of the companies are trading below book value. That didn't make any sense. And I was like, I'm like, what? Then I realized, I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, snap. It's like two sets of book.
Right.
So, and it's, and then a friend of mine who did a private equity fund, and then my former business partner at Lax and Babar, right? He also did a PE fund. So they decided to do a management buyout approach where you just come in and you clean up everything and basically go. And then my other friend, Baltoro, Ali Saigal, they came in and they then had to go after companies that were relatively cleaner, like pharmaceuticals or NAFA and these type of things, right? Like Sapphire Wind. In my case, I'm like, okay, it's just easier to set the ethos right from day one. As you were saying, like you come in and put the governance up, and as you guys do as well, right? So it's a lot easier, one, to look the quantum in Pakistan, I think, and in the generally anywhere you go, 20 to 30% in any cohort end up being bad apples. That's just a subset of how the population, you can't change the nature, right? And I think it's part of a country's evolution cycle. Your system, even if you go back to the US, I always go back to the movie, but I love the History Channel has this documentary, The Men Who Made America. And the things that they're doing, man, it's like Rockefeller. It's exactly the same. They've got this guy on the payroll, that guy. So I'm like, that's when I realized, I'm like, okay, I can move back to Pakistan because there's opportunity. This stuff happens everywhere.
You need enforcement, and you need a culture. You need to do that.
And systems get developed, right? So so you got that. So these things are going to happen, right? So, but as investors, I think that's it, and we do the same. It's like as we come in as a first check, but we say, hey, we want to be on the board. Then there's that regular chime in. It's not just about writing the check, right? It's also being that soundboard. So most of my time, I mean, I'm pretty much deployed as well. I'm doing mostly follow-ons, right? It's actually every day between and I'm also still looking after some of the earlier portfolio companies from Fund One, like as the soundboard. I have like 5 to 6 calls a day scheduled with different founders or different, to help them out. And you can't see, and then we have our internal tracking board where basically my team is constantly getting data, and like every month we're tracking. And if somebody looks like in our internal metrics that they're going to struggle, then we reach out to them in advance and we say, hey guys, you might want to consider start, figuring out a bridge or maybe opening up a round now, right? So those type of metrics.
But just to sort of continue this conversation on governance and culture, right? People have to make money to justify this new way of doing business. So I think it would be fair for behoove all of us who are investing in this market to be focused on exits, because if people don't make money from ethical businesses or venture-backed businesses, then they'll go back to doing things the way they were, because that's how you make money, right? You make 100%. Money on the operations of the business. So I think I always say follow the money, right? Say follow the returns. If people make money, they'll continue to do the right things, and that's really important. So people don't do this because it doesn't make them money, right? People keep 2 sets of books because it's a more economic way for them to live their lives, right? because there isn't returns otherwise, and
yeah.
the system allows it. So
Also, the system, I think, kind of forces your hand to have two sets of books in certain businesses, right? Because a lot of your vendors, etc. I know these, like, say, your cosmetics type of, like, your local mass brands.
right.
Uh,
Even the policy, man. Like, I mean, I have to pay the tax
yeah.
of the vendor's invoice, like
Huh?
as a
Wait.
company, right? That's ridiculous.
And
It's
then the
like it's
vendor's like, listen, if you're
anti
gonna, I
startup.
just need this net amount. Now, whether you want to pay tax, that's up to you. Good luck. So yeah, there's a lot of people, a lot of these businesses that just pay salaries in cash as well. So
Right.
if your salary is 5 lakh rupees, you get 100,000 in your bank account, and the remaining 4 lakh is handed to you in cash, so that you don't like show. So there's the whole value chain. So it's so much easier to do an undocumented business in Pakistan. But one last thing on the governance thing and segueing into the 2021 valuation craze was I noticed that because it became a founders market in 2021, 22, a lot of the governance requirements went down.
Of
So
course.
I know someone who raised like multi-million seed, like one of the biggest seeds, and they came to me for some legal thing. They're like, "Man, how can I increase my salary by 30% because etc. etc." I said, yeah. He's like, so what would be the procedure? I said, okay, so who's on your board? He's like, no one. It's just me and my co-founder. I was like, and what about the investors? Are they shareholders? He's like, no, it's all safe. I was like, man, you can go buy a Prado. No one can say
No,
anything,
right.
really.
No, this is when I stopped investing, right?
Yeah.
Because I got really ticked off. Where what started happening was, a lot of the funds that were coming, by the way, like investing, basically it became like a little bit of a racist thing. Like if you were white, you would end up on a cap table, and the local
Investors, yeah.
investors, you were like, no, we don't need you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then when the capital disappeared, we were
Yeah.
the only ones standing and helping them out. And I was like, yeah, welcome back. But luckily,
Here's the new price.
yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening was, this is so in some instances, and I only did this in one or two deals, where they would not end up giving us board seats, and I was like, listen, if I'm writing a lead check or like a co-lead check, I need a board seat, right? Even if you
Yeah.
have a safe, because that's not how this is going to work, right? And that's why I think the governance, a lot of it has to do with the free money cycle, that it messed things up. But I think a lot of founders have also learned, also because I rubbed it in 2022, 23, when the foreign VCs disappeared. Then I said, look, I mean, yeah, welcome back, and we'll guide you through this, but you need local and foreign combination.
But so in this, I remember that. So you guys closed in 2020, right? And you closed a year after that. Your fund one or fund two?
Fund two.
Fund two. Now, how?
No, I closed in 2022.
Oh, you closed in
Yeah,
20.
June 30th.
Yeah. So how are the LP conversations, how have they changed from back then to now? Like now we've seen Pakistan, like, go through this whole new cycle and a lot of political uncertainty as well. So how have those LP conversations changed?
So from me, a lot of the investors were institutional investors. So they're
Yeah.
patient capital, right? That's like the majority of my fund. The tougher ones was the individual investors. Some of them, and some of them were basically, I think, emotional about politics.
Yeah.
So there was that element in 2022 that it kicked in, that, oh, our leader of choice is gone, so Pakistan is done.
Yeah.
And so that was, so you kind of have to explain to them, hey, these things are part of cycles. It's a long game. As we all said, we're early in the game, right? It's a 10-year game. And then just explaining to them that that's it. And also, by the way, according to the LPA, you can't really go out. Your capital will be wiped out. So
No, I'm saying for
that's it.
say new fund. So you guys have recently
Yeah.
doing your new fund. How, and you probably have, I think, yeah, not probably. I'm thinking you probably have the most family offices from Pakistan than the local groups. How's that sentiment changed? How has that evolved? And how are they viewing this asset class now?
I think because of kind of the economic condition that Pakistan went through, if you talk about the local family offices, I think everyone is now first looking at home, seeing that, in terms of their own businesses and
Right.
and their institutions, how best to navigate through that, and then kind of look at other alternative investments right now. So a lot of family offices that I'm speaking to are basically looking at their businesses. I mean, with interest rates was so high, how are they navigating through all of that? How are they going to manage, banking lines, etc., and that, and with high inflation, their own businesses. So I think that's where most of their time and attention has gone, as opposed to looking at alternative investments, and especially not looking at risky investments. But during this time, I've also seen that institutional investors have really stepped up
Okay.
because this is where they have seen the opportunity. Again, because they have seen cycles, they've been around for decades.
This is
They,
Pakistani institutions.
this is Pakistani institutions, also along with foreign institutions.
DFIs like IFC,
Both. They
BI.
understand these cycles and they also understand that this is the best time. They also understand that getting in now, and because of the economic condition that was there, alhamdulillah, now things are a lot better and stable now. That now, if we get in, is the place where we will be able to really make good money in the next 10 years. So that's how the conversations with LP is right now.
And those guys are coming through. So and with the interest rates now going from 22.5 to now it's what 13,
13.
and expected to go further
Yeah,
lower.
the
I
27.
think another
Yeah.
200 bips is coming
Yeah,
up.
exactly. So are you saying that? So where will the asset allocation for the local family offices be now? PSX may be going to return अच्छे बना लिए, and I think they will continue. I think PSX will go on a thing, but where do you see those return like assets going?
So I'm for Fund 3. I've been having conversations, right? And I'm trying to first like look at the thesis, because I do think VC has changed, just like what the hedge fund industry went through in 2000. I think it's going to be there were too many funds funded back in 2020. It was the
Yeah.
most amount of allocation to VC in the history,
Yeah.
right? So I think we have to kind of go back to the drawing board. Also, the thesis has slightly changed. But the I 100% agree. It's all institutional investors. They're not interested, and some of the conversations were, pension funds should be allocating at least 20%, like the Yale model. So when I was at Laxton, we used to have those discussions because they used to have a lot of institutional investors, but it seems like some of that's starting to resonate now. And so some domestic capital will unlock. Regional capital, again, it's going to end up being either it's very similar to the 70s, right, where the developed markets are going through their own strain. So they may not have the same level of capital to deploy, even through if it's a DFI, right, apart from IFC.
Yeah.
But the Gulf states stepped up. So then having conversation with them, and then for them it ends up being strategic. So conversations are more in like Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and Dubai
Yeah.
versus in DC and London. I mean, those are there, but those are like comparatively now those are smaller checks.
But is it what are you seeing in say Silicon Valley, say with the LPs? How is
Well,
that?
I mean,
getting-
LPs have been living through a very dry period as far as exits are concerned right now,
Yeah.
because the IPO market's been shut down. There's a lot of private companies that have been around for a while. So I think, and corporate, as I say, animal spirits to go buy businesses has also been restrained. I think the expectation is 2025, 26 will be good years for exits. First of all, the IPO market will reopen. It's going to happen, this Stripe, which is in our portfolio. We have a shareholding from a sale, and some other companies will go public. I mean, that's going to happen at some point. You will need that liquidity. And then I think corporate buyers are also going to be back. So it's an important period for us, because venture for institutional investors is exit fund new commitments, right? So if you don't have exits, you don't have new commitments at the same scale, although venture still is attracting that. But you can see that in the fundraising numbers, I think for 24 were pretty small, relatively low.
Yeah.
So I think that's the cycle, part of the cycle we're in right now. And we'll see. I think we've got some companies that have been building good strategic value businesses, and certainly have partners who keep sniffing around. So I think we'll see more action in the next 12 to 24 months than we have in the past.
So are you also seeing the business or the model of VC changing? Like, do you think this 2 and 20 model will continue? Like, because from whatever I've read, and mostly about Silicon Valley and that part of the world, is that it's the power law also applies to what funds
Yeah,
return, right?
yeah,
And
yeah, I
it's
think
just
that's-
those 10, 20 funds that are giving those exponential returns and getting into those deals.
Right.
Do you think the model of the VC fund will now change?
I think that the multi-stage, very large pools of capital, you will see more of that, and I think that is going to happen. I think you'll have specialized funds that do certain things well that will continue to exist.
Yeah.
But it's like any other ecosystem of investors and LPs, is that GPs and LPs, where people will want to understand what's your alpha, what's the source of your differentiation. If it's from your position in the ecosystem, I think that'll go to the larger funds. That's just going to happen over time. They'll continue to scale. And for groups like us, it's going to be like, here's our thesis. This is what we do better. This is the numbers that show that we do this better. and why you should back us. And I think that sort of bifurcation will happen. There's been too many funds as well, so there will be
Yeah,
mortality.
that's a consolidation.
That's
I
a
mean, I think
consolidation.
like single GP funds like mine have to really go back to the drawing board,
Yeah.
like and collaborate, like or Atif, right?
Yeah.
It's like we have to think about collaborating, or because it's not, there were just too much money floating around, and pretty much everyone we saw that. I mean, that's I was alluding not to the established funds in 21.
Yeah.
I was alluding to like the random like kids, podcasting kids. I won't name them.
Yeah.
Raising like 500 million from Tiger and all these guys front running, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what is going on? And they're like, hey, I'm leading Series B rounds, and I've never done due diligence, right? So it's like, I mean, that's a bubble. That's exactly what
Definition
happened
of
in
a bubble, I
dot-com.
think.
It's people made ton of money. I'm sure you remember the dot-com bubble in the US.
Yes,
right?
yes, sure.
It's like the exact same repeat in 21. So
Yeah.
let's see how that plays out.
But so in Pakistan, given we only have 5-7 funds, what kind of opportunity do you see for other funds to come up? Like, do you still think like there'll be venture? Do you think more private equity? Do you think more growth? Like, where do you see the opportunity for new investors to come into Pakistan?
So even PE funds are now specifically looking at allocating towards tech, right? I mean, just if you look at the quantum,
Yeah.
like the S&P 500, if you look at it like 10, 20 years ago, right? Barely was 10% was tech. Today, that quantum is, last I checked, at least for my 21 deck, it was like somewhere in the 27%. I think it probably is higher now, right?
Probably higher.
From market cap perspective, it's like humongous, right?
Right.
Given the trillions that each one of the big tech, Magnificent Seven are sitting on. So I think that pretty much everybody understands. India, when you extrapolate, you see a similar type of thing, that the mix by 2030 will be tech. I think Pakistan maybe just put in a 5-10 year lag, 5 to 6 year lag. So eventually, even our listings IPOs will eventually be tech IPOs, right? So I think private equity is going to allocate 40 to 50%. That's the only way they can raise also their funds. And my friends that are in it, we're having these discussions, right? So that's one
Even in
element.
Pakistan, would it be tech?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because look. So I mean, what I feel is like, one of the biggest things, everybody's living in the present and now, and so I get that question on exits from everyone, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so maybe you'll see one later this year, right? So things are in the works. I mean, my thesis is that developed market, like let's just call it what it is, right? It's the American digital empire versus the Chinese digital empire, right? And everybody else has their tech, but Europeans really lost the
Yeah.
plot here,
We
right?
have the regulations though.
So now if you're exactly. So now if you have if you're once you list publicly as a tech company, there's pressure on you to show growth constantly, right? And eventually you saturate in your own market, and then you do growth by acquisition. So eventually that growth by acquisition will spill over, and I'm starting to see the first signs of that is coming in. So a lot of our exits are going to end up being growth by acquisition. I also don't believe there's going to be like 50 or like 100 unicorns coming out of Pakistan over the next, so we're not pricing like 2% at an exit and then $1 billion. That's going to be 1 or 2 companies in our portfolio.
You do think that
max.
there will be unicorns coming out of
Yeah,
Pakistan?
it's a quantum of 2 things. One is it depends on it's the TAM. Some of the portfolio companies have that scale. The other is also debasement of currency. So it's like, like I keep going back, and I've done this on other podcasts. It's like, if you've ever seen Austin Powers, was it Dr. Evil, right?
Yeah.
When they pulled him out of cryogenics, he held the world hostage for $1 million and was notified that, hey, that's not a lot of money. So, like if you go back to the 80s, $100,000 was a lot, right?
Yeah.
Now, even $1 million is not a lot if you're in New York and London or San
Yeah.
Francisco. It's like, okay. So it's the same thing. So 100, like, just think of the quantum of what's happening, right? $1 trillion market cap is pretty common in tech now, in terms of, at least in the Magnificent Seven. I think by 2030 or the cycle after that, by 2034, you'll see individual trillionaires, because they're already at 300 billion. That's bigger than the market cap of Goldman Sachs at times,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
individuals. So that's debasement. And so hyperinflation is concentrated there. We'll get our unicorns. I mean, we love to celebrate in like, with that, like Dr. Evil. Like
Without
in
context.
without context, it's like, it was like making me laugh, like when the government of Pakistan was basically out there discussing a $1 billion loan with the IMF, and at the same time, like OpenAI is raising
10 billion.
like 10 billion and like
Yeah,
150
for
billion.
the
So I'm like, guys, did you guys not get the memo that there's not
Yeah.
this is not a lot of money?
Yeah.
Like, again, going back to the Trump coin, which I think is something like completely unprecedented where capital, in terms of capital formation, 75, $80 billion in the span of like, what, 48 hours? So I get that. But Pakistan mein ye wali valuation, do you feel that, look, let's talk about the exits now, right? So where do you see these valuations coming from? Like, will it be the PSX? Will it be someone coming in?
So let me ask you: would you guys take companies public on the Pakistan Stock Exchange?
Yeah.
That's right, you know, right?
Yeah,
So there's liquidity.
exactly.
So this year, in fact, I should say this. This year, there's an option for people because again, global M2 is what you have to keep an eye on, right? That's about to pop as the Fed finally stops the QT. Whenever they're predicted to do it this quarter or next, that's going to cause like a liquidity spike, right? And then everybody just mimics it because it's just that's a herd mentality. So you can actually list, and the best thing about the Pakistan stock market or the GEM board, which has not been utilized yet effectively, but the 2-3 companies that have done it have actually been able to raise like a couple of $1 million, right, or $1 million. And so you can raise like partially if your revenue, if your is about EBITDA is about $1 million, you can get an 7 to 8x of that, and then list about pull some liquidity. I'm not saying to like go complete IPO,
Yeah,
pull some liquidity from that. I mean, so you have to be creative to go through this journey over a 10-15 year period till you get an exit. I don't think in Pakistan, I don't see too many exits before. I think they'll start in the 20, which is that comes out to that 7 to 8 year
Yes.
number, 28, 30, 32 cycle, like as in, like if I had to like kind of just guess, like I think eventually that'll come. It's going to be a combination of acquisitions and listings, whether it's domestic or even in Dubai or some of these other markets. Right?
The ambition would be to list in Saudi or internationally,
Yes,
right? And
exactly.
that-
Any market, because they really want, they're trying to attract more companies to come in. I think my perspective on the PSX is, I think, like Faisal said, for example, private equity companies are looking at making technology investments. And I think Pakistan Stock Exchange today is also forward looking and seeing that technology companies should have a higher multiple. And I think that's what we're seeing right now in the PSX. PSX, the technology companies get a higher multiple than, let's say, your conventional businesses. So looks like the people have their thought process is in the right place. Now, the only thing that I would like to be different in the PSX is that there should be more depth in terms of funding that's available.
Yeah.
If you are going to consider a $10 million IPO funding event to be one of the largest in the country, that has to change, right? I think
Yeah.
the moment where our market is able to, let's say, create $50 million worth of liquidity during an IPO event, I think that's when I would really be encouraged to do so. So that's something. And I think as the market capitalization increases and, as the country becomes more stable and more foreign funding and happens, I think, inshallah, we should reach that stage.
But do you think that's a function of the fact that, because one of my big things with PSX is, okay, where are the IPOs going to come from?
Yeah.
And for me, when I look at it, it's just a lack of continuum of capital, right? You
It's like
have
what,
your
200,000 participants.
200,000. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but even-
UIN is
Or a
70,000.
250.
and
But
how many
look at that
companies
as an
listed?
upside, right? Look, one like the people will eventually start participating in the market, right?
Yeah.
It's a quantum of education, whether it's through learning through YouTube and multiple other.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of the beauty of this age, right? So if you look at like the 90s and 2000s, this is a very different time. You're seeing people from all demographics literally learning stuff on YouTube, and then whether it's cooking or whatnot,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's an education. I mean, I'm seeing at least in the crypto realm, the amount of young kids
Yeah.
that are actually, I mean, we had the third highest on-chain activity. That's investments.
Yeah.
So if you make the process of onboarding easier,
Yeah.
like it's just like banks, right?
Yeah.
The banks want high net worth clients, so therefore only a small quantum of the population is there, and that's where wallets and Easy Pesa and NaPay and all this stuff comes in, right? And then if you look at the brokerage houses, eventually you need to make access easier, and as these fintech platforms start integrating, you'll see more and more people jump in.
But
Can I ask? Can I ask a question? You said if you people would raise $50 million on the PSX, that's what you would consider a milestone, right? So from a capital availability
Yeah.
point of view, what would boards do with that kind of money? I mean, are they looking at it as liquidity for themselves, or is it primary issuance for use by the company?
I mean, I don't know.
If you were a tech company, no, you're on a board
Yeah.
of tech. You guys are
I
on
mean,
boards of
I
tech
would like
companies.
my exit to happen that way.
So I would
I
like
can
you
get
also-
investors
Yeah.
back, yeah.
So you think IPOs would be exit events for Pakistani tech companies?
Partial.
At least for early stage investors, right?
Right.
And I think people who maybe come on later stage, the funding can be utilized to expand. or increase
I mean,
operation.
IPOs have lockups in the States, right? So
Exactly.
people can't get out. I mean,
Can't get out.
early investors have 6-month lockups. They'll often stay.
Yeah.
Founders have lockups. So it's
We've had
not a
lockups in
liquidity
Gobi for
event.
12 months. Yeah.
It's not an exit event,
That's
right?
why the price is always trading lower,
Lower.
6 months later.
Yeah, no, but they're not exit events. And the reason I asked the question is, and this goes back to the ambition, right, of the boards and the companies themselves. If you talk about it as a liquidity event, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then you'll have lower valuations because people are like, you're getting out, I'm going to pay you a certain amount. But if you're using the money for primary issuance, which again goes back to what's your ambition with the capital and for that company, I think that's a more interesting story. So that's why I was asking the question. But it seems like you'd have to have that happen first before you'd think about whether the opportunity to invest that capital is, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is all speculative. I mean,
Right,
this is
exactly, right.
And some of it wishful thinking.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Also, some of this, like I think the kids who are investing in crypto, also a lot of the crypto investments are led by just good like perception around who's launching a new coin, and if they like the person, and if there's a good story around it, they do it. Where do you see more companies coming from on the PSX? The family businesses, etc., they don't see the value because they feel the. I mean, our PSX is still undervalued, right? If you look at 2007 in dollar terms, PSX was much more valuable than it is today. So where would the new companies come from?
Look, it's an evolution of society, right? So if you look at India, even Pakistan, I mean,
Yeah,
before it was very common, like at least my generation, I'm one of the few people that returned back to Pakistan.
yeah,
Most of my friends are settled abroad. They have no plans of coming back.
yeah.
Ammar's, you're also one of the few people that's actually coming and looking at stuff here. Most people
Mhm.
are just, they stay there, right? But if you look at millennials and Gen Zers, most of them, they graduated post 2008, and in a time where jobs are not abundant in developed markets, right? So they're coming back and they're building businesses. Like, so the first wave is, I think the restaurant scene in Pakistan is an exact, like I'm talking about the tier one, is exactly what you're seeing. Those people have learned from those economies, come back and are building businesses here, making money, right? Same thing is happening with this cosmetics, like Myra from Go Natural,
Yeah,
exact same
yeah.
thing, right? So as these businesses with better governance, now they've learned, because remember a lot of these businesses are pre-partition, like I'm talking about the existing incumbent businesses, and post-partition that operated in a non-financialized economy, and then when financialization came over them, some of them adapted, they became the big business groups, and the ones that didn't kept on operating in that double book setup, right? Um, I think this evolution is going to change, but so we have to have patience.
Yeah.
And all we can do is draw parallels from what has happened in India, since they're slightly more advanced than us in this stage. So, and then liquidity. The other thesis I have, and again, everything is speculative here. So, is that if you look at China, the spill once investors enter a region, China is a very tricky. I mean, I remember once during my MBA program, we did a China trip. In Sequoia, China, they were saying that, look, there's times we've invested in a deal, the company became a unicorn, and it turned out the founder's uncle was a judge in the province, and we were just basically wiped off the cap table, and there's nothing you can do, right?
Yeah.
Or the governor of a province. So he goes, but the upside is so massive that you're willing to learn the process. So similarly, as people enter India, which they already have, India is the growth engine this cycle, right? And so it's human nature to front run to look for new opportunities, and that spillover effect will eventually come to Pakistan. It's a massive economy,
Yeah.
and I think you know we I would have said we're like a South Korea or Japan to China.
Yeah.
I think we're like South Korea to China. Maybe now we're at Thailand or Vietnam, but that's still a massive upside, man.
Yeah.
It's like that's how you have to view this, right? So
No, absolutely. Now, that makes a lot of sense. But where will more entrepreneurial finance come from in Pakistan, right? Because now when we look at it, it's those 5, 6 funds that you guys are doing, and since you're doing venture, you are quite restricted in what you can invest in. And also want to know, like, so why does PE not work in Pakistan or other growth capital not work in Pakistan, and why aren't there more funds here?
it's some of it has to do with, again, the fear of investing here, perception wise.
Hmm.
But again, as India gets priced, look, it's like plots. You're not gonna, if something gets priced up, you're gonna buy in DHA City only when phase 8 gets to a certain quantum that it reaches, it's no longer an investment
Yeah,
worth a return, right?
yeah,
So similarly, that's why I keep going back to that analogy. Like, economies around us have to get saturated before the either they get saturated and then the spillover happens, or we just improve our governance and as
And
a
attract more
country and
investment.
attract more investment, right? So I don't see this one happening anytime soon. That's why I keep going to this example that like the price up around us.
But
I think as far as sorry,
sorry, please go ahead.
as far as PE goes, right? I think if you look at, and this is a good question, but Europe has a vibrant middle market PE business for people buying, family owned businesses that are transitioning out of the
Yeah.
family into PE. That's obviously it's not that vibrant from what I can tell in Southeast Asia or in Africa or other markets because in the end that they have whether it's this double set of books or whether they understand cash flow makes you money, but people sort of keep businesses in their family. I mean, if there is a demonetization or if there is a sort of getting off the cash economy in Pakistan, I think you will find people say, look, now it's worth it for me to sell my business and move on and do that. So there's got to be some things that line up to create a market for sellers, not just buyers, right? All of these markets have both sides of these things. And if they're good businesses to buy, I think people will buy them. I mean, there will be PE activity here. But it's got to be for the right businesses. And I think growth is the same thing. There's got to be a good, willing seller that says, I'm going to take growth capital and make a good case for why I need growth capital. And the growth, because again, the growth investor is saying, because I'm investing at X, it's got to be worth more than X when I exit. So you got to do something with my money. It's not just money for the sake of running the business that you're investing in now. So I think those are the things that the sellers also have to exist, and those markets have both things need to emerge.
And
So-
and kind of I think something that I think will really help PE is going to be venture and what we do in the companies that we create here, because this is essentially going to be good deal flow. I'm imagining, I have not run a PE firm myself in Pakistan, but I'm imagining deal flow to be a problem. And it's going to be natural evolution for us to kind of graduate our companies to these PEs. And secondly, I think coming down to what you said on sellers, what I've noticed at least in Pakistan is there's always been a massive disconnect between sellers and buyers.
Okay.
We've never kind of been able to get people on the same page, right? One will want the stars, the other will want to give you dirt,
Right.
right? So it's kind of the market has to mature enough to really say, okay, how do we really
Spreads
value
have to
the company?
narrow.
Yes,
Right?
and it has to make sense for both parties.
It's like going to like a shop and there's no price tags on anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like
I mean, when
whatever
I
you-
first moved here, I bought Lay's packets for like 3x because I was going to like one shop in Kosar that was selling local products priced at almost like I was like, man, Pakistan's really expensive. It's more expensive than New York. Then I realized I was just going to the one shop that was like all the
Ripping you
foreigners
off.
were going to,
Yeah.
and like everything was priced 10x up.
Yeah.
So
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. I think you have to have buyers and sellers, and if the numbers reflect the business, it's an interesting question. I mean, like Faisal has a thesis around this, and I think that is an interesting could be a binary event for Pakistan if you do actually end up having a cleaner economy with more digitization driving that. And if that happens, then you have. I think that could unlock the PE market for sure.
fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly.
by PE market, another thing that I mean is like businesses that would typically traditionally be PE investments, right? So if say I want to greenfield project, so there's no double books, nothing, but I want to start a chain of restaurants. VC won't invest in a chain of restaurants, right? So where is the capital for that coming from? And also, Faisal, one more thing with this is I could go on Shark Tank.
Those I was
Yeah,
gonna say that.
yeah.
Okay, so this is where I was.
You're the media celebrity, so you have to answer this question.
I'm not a
So
celebrity.
I
but-
feel like yeah, Shark Tank is doing this micro PE role,
So
right?
I'll tell you personally, okay, in all honesty, and I think you might have to edit this one out. But when I was going on Shark Tank, I thought, like my motivation level was like, it's gonna be like the NIC deal flow.
Please don't let me edit this out.
But and actually the NSC's helped
Yeah.
with some of the deal flow coming there. So not to their credit, they've also evolved and improved quite
Yeah.
a bit. The old NICs.
Yeah.
I was so pleasant. And there was barely any tech deals there. Maybe the quantum was 20%. The rest were brick and mortar. And one thing I noticed was the resilience of the people in this country, the amount of middle income and young kids that have produced like apparel companies, cosmetic companies,
Exactly,
like
yeah.
food businesses. It was just insane. Like it shocked me. And literally that perception bias of mine was taken away because they were actually really good deals that came out there, right? And that was just a subset. Like they presented 96 deals to us. I would say at least 50% of them were very viable businesses, right? Now, what's the state? And so when I signed up for it, I thought I'm just going on like a panel at Disrupt or something, right? So I didn't realize the scale of this thing. So when I went out in the market and like I mean like as in afterwards, the number of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds coming up and actually talking about business, I was in shock, right? So this is actually training, not just
Yeah.
basically like it's training potential entrepreneurs. Also, the other quantum I've noticed is the amount of interest, inbound interest from traditional families, like their children, like the millennials and Gen Zers, that they're now interested in investing or like they were asking to co-invest in deals and things like that, right? So I think India kind of went through also this thing. They're in season 14, and I think this will actually help
I mean,
create
look, and this is
entrepreneurship
it's a
and
very
culture.
powerful point, right? And I've been in the States for 40 years now. I've been a bunch of time, right? I've been working there and living there, and understanding how business works is something that you get from the water, right? Everybody understands how it works because it's a capitalist society, and I think Pakistan is still going through that transition. You know what I mean? I think that's why. So the point that you make about a cultural shift, it's a super powerful point, because I think. Um, Nobody expects in the park. I don't think most people, nobody, people don't expect the government's going to make them rich here, right? So then you got to figure out how you're going to do that. And then what is your role models? What are you going to think about as a viable business? You expand the frame, you expand the opportunity set, you'll see a lot more interesting ideas come out. So I agree with that.
Yeah, also, an entrepreneurship is not an option. So at least when I was growing, so my parents are both professionals.
Yeah.
When I was growing up and going out of school, entrepreneurship was never a
it's
viable
like-
career choice or option that I thought of.
Right.
But my Maiman friends,
because
Right, exactly.
we would have all been a disappointment.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Doctor, engineer, lawyer.
yeah, कि
Or
पढ़ो
you're
क्योंकि
done.
but my friends who belong to families that were always entrepreneurial,
Sure.
उनके लिए नौकरी करना, like getting a job was not an option, right? They were like, यार गालियाँ पड़ेंगी, we have to start a business, right?
Right.
And we have to think about it in those terms. And I think it purely comes down to availability of and access of capital, access to entrepreneurial finance, right?
Mubariz, I love the fact that you brought that point up because essentially what made me very passionate about doing venture was this point itself. It was that you would see some really bright professionals who would join great companies, MNCs, and I would, come into interaction with them in my previous role. And I would think to myself, man, this guy is brilliant. I mean, he's maybe even smarter than the chief executive or the owner. But what was his option to really start a business? He didn't have one. If he went to his parents who are retired, maybe have a home that they've bought after retirement, I'm sure if he asked, I want to put this house as under mortgage to get the money, they would say yes. But it's unfair to ask that. It's unfair to ask your retired parents to put their house under mortgage to support you to do that. In venture, we solve for that. It's that great person, maybe who has a brilliant idea, who's a great executor, comes to us, and we plug in that hole where we put in that capital, and this is how you will get innovation to happen. This is how you will get entrepreneurship to really happen, for employment to happen. And this is something that at least made me very passionate about venture, and that's why I really want to see this through, is because we're really solving a big problem in this country. Otherwise, you'll see the same things being done traditionally. It has to be disrupted. We need to give everyone an opportunity to be able to have a go at
Look,
it.
I'm not a good advocate. I agree with you completely, and I'm not a role model for this. But the venture asset class includes investing in Sweet Greens and includes investing in Warby Parker in the States. I mean, right? That's a restaurant chains. That's a retailer of glasses. So those things are venture deals because they can deliver venture returns in some scale of time that's different. I'm a software investor, so I have a particular way of looking at the world that I think is a great way to build a business. I like them because they're good businesses, they're good business models, but they should be physical businesses. There should be investors for physical businesses, and if you deliver numbers, you will have LPs that want to do that
But
business.
so from a Pakistan perspective, don't you think those kind of businesses have more of a ready market today, and entrepreneurs who are better suited to doing that as opposed to say building B2B or enterprise SaaS in Pakistan? Enterprise SaaS की मेरे ख्याल से market Pakistan में बहुत छोटी है, right? Barely any. But if you want to do a Sweet Greens equivalent or some of your say Shark Tank business, some of the deals that I've seen.
I mean, I'm diversifying my like person. I mean, this was my
Yeah,
personal
personal,
capital. So I'm my problem is my business is tech, and my personal investments all in tech, right?
Yeah.
So this was for the first time me diversifying and putting money in.
So those businesses that raised from you guys at Shark Tank, where is their next round going to come from? Because that's what I think about, right? And there's no institutional capital available in
So I got pinged by so many traditional business family people,
Yeah.
like, and people that I knew. They're like, "Hey, man, that business look good. Can we take a look at this as well, right?" And so just like we do in VC,
Yeah.
once you invest, you're like, yeah, sure, talk to them,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you do intros,
Yeah,
right? So it's
exactly.
look, I mean, the culture, it will evolve, and interest will come, right? I mean, if you look at like the way, with the way I'm seeing, like, I mean, the hotel revolution, boutique hotel revolution, our hotel industry hasn't changed from like the 1970s, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've got like ambiance hotels coming up. You've got like Fred Hotel in Lahore. I mean, I don't know if you've been there.
It's very nice.
It's pretty
I love
cool,
it.
right? And
Yeah.
then you've got the recently Coach resorts.
Yeah.
I want to go out, like, it's
Yeah,
30
yeah.
minutes out.
Looks
Yeah.
really nice.
And then there's a bunch of northern area like resorts. People are coming up with innovation. They're raising money from friends and family. Actually, 2-3 of the deals that I did on Shark Tank, subsequently, when we were reaching out to them, they weren't showing that much interest because they actually think of better offers after airing. And I was like, and so it was almost like I'm like, we're pinging them, and they're like, yeah, we'll just get back to you with data. And I'm like, this is very odd. And then one of them came on. It's like, yeah, well, to be honest, we've got some more other investors. Would you be open to it? And they never called back.
Yeah.
So
I
That's good.
must admit, I've watched only a little bit of what I haven't watched all of Faisal's oeuvre as a media star.
no,
But
I speak,
which I'm looking
I
forward
speak
to.
very little, by the way, on the
Yeah,
show.
I'm
but
looking forward to seeing
listen
that.
more.
I'm now going to pay it. But tell me, what were your favorite Shark Tank deals? Each one, do you have one that come out? I'd be interested. What
so
were
again-
one? Everybody has them, I'm sure.
Like, as in the ones I did, or like
No, just what
globally?
you think, even if ones you didn't do, that you wish you had. One of the ones that didn't take your money.
The one that got missed, which I never realized that is Ring on the Shark Tank US, right? They basically Ring the doorbell that Amazon bought.
Yeah.
Everybody passed on it. That company sold for like $1 billion. Amazon acquired it, right?
Yeah,
And it was a basic idea that I thought was already solved. Even when I saw it, I'm like, wait, how is this opportunity? It was just a doorbell that's like, Wi-Fi enabled, and you have an app. You can see who's
But what
come.
about Shark
Pa-
Tank Pakistan?
Pakistan.
Yeah.
So my favorite deal was obviously DigiLawyer,
Yeah, I know
because
the
it's
foundation.
again up my alley, right? And
It's
those-
software and
yeah,
AI now.
it's
yeah.
like built on top of ChatGPT, and kind of developing it. So I like that as my favorite deal. There's another one that's the pink salt one,
Yeah.
that Himalayan pink salt. I think
And
that
they're
has
doing
legs.
those products out of it, right? Yeah, those lamps and a lot of that stuff. And
But,
even
but,
like putting
they're like
and all.
bricks that a lot of spas use. So the demand is pretty big. And then the other one is the rare gems from Gilgit Baltistan.
Okay.
It's that was the other deal.
What was it? They're actually a gem company?
Yeah, so basically over there it's like a different system. In when you identify a mine, it's a very different. GB is governed by a different system.
Right.
So there's no processing facility, so they have to take those stones all the way to Peshawar, and then margins get lost. So this was actually they were raising to set up that processing facility, and then that opens up. So it's like interesting things like that, right?
Are a lot of them? So one question that I got, and I was just speaking to Junaid about it, was that how true are the numbers that are presented versus what happens when you go into the diligence stage, and how many deals do you think go through or get dropped off on the way? Because a general expectation is that every deal will happen,
Yeah.
and that's not what happens anywhere in the world for any Shark Tank, right? So what is your view around that? How many fall through the cracks?
So there's two components. One is obviously the numbers not adding up. Then the other is the co-investors as well, right? And that 20-30% quantum of bad apples
Yeah.
that existed on the judging panel as well.
Right.
You'll see that emerge eventually. And so then let's come to the deals itself, right? So we're going step by step, at least the ones I did. And so I went for the biggest deal first, did the due diligence, because that's the highest risk for me, right? And we're going down the pipeline for that. In the Arch, the global producer, he came, and Usman Malik, who's the executive producer. I was sitting and asking them just in a casual conversation that they've done it in 48 countries.
Yeah.
So he said, basically, in the rest of the world, about 40 to 50% of the deals actually get funded.
And
But
the
that's
rest will get funded.
it's a higher quantum, right? Obviously, of like controls and like best practices. In India and Pakistan, I think it'll be anywhere from 25 to 30%.
That will get funded, and
They'll
the
get
remaining
funded
will
versus,
not get
yeah.
funded.
I mean, which is
About-
much higher than venture capital, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like
Sure.
for like every 100 deals we do, we end up doing one, right? So like look at
More difficult to get venture funding than get into any Harvard.
So what was your favorite Shark Tank deal?
Actually, I haven't seen too many, but the one that I did see I really liked was there was a company, I'm forgetting the name of it, but that was taking Oryx and taking
That's it. Yeah,
marble.
Saraf.
Yes, Saraf.
Saraf, yeah.
I
those
really
guys-
liked
That's the
Saraf.
the
process.
largest
That's
deal in
the-
history of any Shark Tank.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying.
What
That,
was it?
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the if you look at like I like Bazaar and Zarai were doing something similar, right? So that's why I
Yeah.
passed on. But that deal is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Those
What
guys
did they
are
do?
sharp.
So what are they
and
doing?
amazing.
So I think they were taking marble from this part of the world and then exporting it
So
to.
it's basically commodities.
Commodities.
Trading, yeah. So a lot of the capital that they raised was working capital just to be able to trade more. But they're also building a tech platform around being able to trade it more effectively, being able to finance.
To source the product from Pakistan a lot easier.
For raw materials for construction materials.
It's mostly just minerals and say onyx, etc.
Okay, cool.
But they've been doing it for a while. The guys also were like from an accounting background. So when you so you can tell when you ask them numbers,
Right.
they're just switched on. I mean,
Right.
they were
That makes a
very
huge difference in situations like that. What was your favorite?
I've seen quite a fair. So I feel like, and this is again something going back to what we spoke to Junaid about, was like I think everyone invested in at least one shoe company on Shark Tank, right? A lot of
Not
people
me.
making shoes.
I passed.
Yeah, oh, you passed on all the shoe companies.
It's a commodity, man. It's like you go online. There's
Yeah.
like the same thing available. Like everybody's
It's-
got like
it's
a
about the brand,
Shopify. Yeah.
right? Yeah, because वो handmade वगैरह है. My general thesis on Pakistan is कि यार if you can make a brand and if you can do handmade products and export them, anything that doesn't require electricity,
Yeah.
and you can leverage on the cheap labor that you have in Pakistan, and then you can start exporting. Phenomenal. You've cracked that code, right? Where you can do that. So I liked a lot of those brands, and that's again I've like have been looking into a PE fund or a micro PE fund in Pakistan, and I feel like that was just
What drew
great.
Yeah.
And the education.
That's your real passion.
Yeah. And the education part of it has been doing. Like I feel like Shark Tank, Pakistan has done a great job on that front,
Yeah.
right? You guys have also helped educate. I like Junaid's little outros where he explains different concepts and
Yeah.
just breaks them
Yeah,
down.
Junaid's stellar, man.
Yeah. He's been like the whole team. I feel like has done a pretty great job. I did see a clip. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Is that Indian Shark Tank wala? I forget his name, but he was criticizing the Pakistani Shark
I
Tank.
didn't
saying
see
कि,
that.
I don't understand the kind of deals that they're doing, etc.
But I thought our deals were pretty good.
I thought they were pretty
Yeah.
normal as well, and I feel like even Indian Shark Tank deals I've seen the earlier
Yeah.
seasons they've been kind of all over the place. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But coming down to founders in Pakistan, right? Now you've spent I think right now a month and you
6 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, you did the whole disrupt thing. You went around to Lahore and Islamabad as well, and you
Yep.
met quite a few founders. What is your overall takeaway from what most of the founders in Pakistan like? How are they different? Are they not different? Like, what are your impressions?
Look, I've backed some and I'm looking at others, and I think there are some world-class founders over here. They have solved problems that are meaningful for them or that they saw in a local market, and they've built good products to take them forward. They're building teams. They are still going through that cultural sense of what it takes. Startups evolve. So I think there's all about the learning, all the things that people around this table have to do, which is mentor them on management development, business development, thinking about how which opportunities to pursue, which not to pursue. I think those are the things that I think it's about the mentorship that founders need, but the quality of the founders is actually quite high. I do think it's about, I think one of the constraints that you see with a lot of people and all the opportunities that they're pursuing are often have a finance angle to them, which reflect the lack of capital or debt capital available in Pakistan. That makes me a little wary from the outside, because there's how are these companies going to get the capitals to fund things? So I think some of that maybe goes back to being the constraints of the local market, deciding, and good entrepreneurs saying this is where the opportunity is, but then what's the second step? So you see the opportunity to get the business started, but then you have to have a funding model for those businesses and going forward. So those are things that I worry about, and I think that goes back to my question of perspective. Like, what are you building for? Which customer base are you building for? And you said this already. I don't think Pakistan's a great B2B software market. They're not sophisticated buyers of software here. So if you're trying to build a business that is driven by that, you sort of have to look outside, which is great. I mean, you should look outside, or look at maybe a sector where you can get something started here and then look outside. So that's what I think. But the quality of the people is high, and the engineering talent I've seen from everything I've seen is building good product.
Another thing that we spoke about earlier, which stood out for me, was when you said that most Pakistani founders that you see are trying to solve for big macro problems,
Right.
right? Like they have to fix the country as well, or
Right.
this part of what does not work in the country as well,
Yeah.
which I thought was an interesting perspective because,
Yeah. I mean, look.
uh,
And this is. And I know Faisal, you're very and being driven by macro is a great thing, and but in the end, you have to find good businesses. I think venture is a micro business, right? You're trying to find the companies that will make it from here to the finish line, and
Yeah,
that may
by the
not.
way, I'm using macros to invest in Pakistan,
I
but
understand.
not so like in fact I actually see them like पहले पाकिस्तान को तो solve करें फिर बाहर जाएंगे. It's
But it's. I think the point more is. Like education is an interesting one, right? Education is a huge challenge in Pakistan. Finding out a fundable business model that you can build a big business in Pakistan or any outside Pakistan in education, it's hard. Education is a very hard vertical.
and health tech.
EdTech is hard globally. So then you see this big macro problem in Pakistan. You say, I want to do something. There's already a couple of odds stacked against you because it's just hard to do that anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's where that's sort of an example of where solving a macro problem may not get you to a good micro opportunity. And that's down to the choice of the founder. And founders should do what they're passionate about. I don't have to invest in it, but they should do what they're passionate about, right?
100%.
but have you guys noticed this? Like most founders are also like trying to fix problems that are way too big.
I mean, look, it just comes down to like, so every time, which is, I don't want to kill that drive. So usually like, I mean, I'm even having discussions with them. They're like, I want to sell my company for $1 billion, right? So I start having discussions. I'm like, what do you want? And they're like, oh, I want to have an impact. Eventually it comes down to personal. I want to make some money, right? I try to get that. And then I try to rationalize their thought process where I'm like, okay, guys, look, if it's some of the startups, by the way, are just a feature. They're not a platform, right? So then you have to rationalize, be like, look, I'm betting on this at a low valuation, but your likely exit is going to be a 20, $30 million exit, but it'll be a 4 or 5x for me, and you'll make, you right now today you have 1 lakh in your account, you might end up with $1 million, right? So be happy, right? So you have to rationalize those things. I think that it just comes down to, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's just down to the investor. But I think you have to do some coaching in Pakistan. But anytime I hear, like when people try to solve two big problems, like really, really large problems in Pakistan, you do have to rationalize that a bit. I agree 100% with you on that one.
I haven't come across that as yet in terms of founders. I think the founders that we've come across are now like really trying to just solve problems. And I think something that we've seen with a recent investment has been that I guess now as the whole euphoria of 2021 has gone down, now you've got really passionate guys who are not in it because they think it was a way to make a quick buck, but they're actually in it because they see a problem. They really want to solve it and they think they have the solution and they think that they can build it out. That's been a really pleasant change for me. And with that and for me, that's important because something as we've seen with our portfolio has been that the founder has to be really resilient, has to really believe in it because at times when I think maybe building a company is one of the hardest things you'll do. There are all these ups and downs, and it's during that time that you just have to sometimes just learn to survive the kind of conversations we were having in 2021. Just survive, and you will see a better day, and things will work out for you. But in order to survive, it takes a lot. Your planning, managing your finances, your own personal life. I'm sure mental health as well. Everything takes a real hit, and you have to really manage yourself. And I think the founders that we're seeing now are resilient. They really believe in the problem that they're trying to solve. So that's been a really pleasant change for me that see some great talent come out.
So look, I mean, I'll give you every VC is full of cliches, right? So
Yeah.
one of my cliches that I roll out in where I work most of my time, which is Silicon Valley, is I'll tell founders just because it's hard doesn't mean it's worth doing.
Yeah.
Right? Those are two different things.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think founders look at something and say, that's a really hard problem and I know how to solve it. That's great. Good. But I don't have to invest in it. And I don't know if it's a good investment. So I think those are the questions that sometimes with these that's another way to think about this macro thing, right? Solving education is a really hard problem, may not be worth solving for a venture-backed startup.
But I feel like a lot of founders also position their businesses as this possibility of big venture return because the only capital available was venture capital. right? I feel like at that point, if other forms of capital was available,
Yeah,
their
100%.
goals, targets, and the way they positioned their businesses would also have been very different. Actually, incidentally, when you spoke about, like, don't you think a bit of delusion is also really important for people? Anyone who's going to build something really big and something that's really improbable. Like, I was actually looking at the how Panama Canal came about,
Sure.
right? And that guy was like,
Seriously nuts.
yeah, seriously nuts. He spent like 8 years just like first got convinced the US government to take over, build a new country called Panama, take
Right.
it from Colombia, and then just get the whole thing done. Right?
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people died building
Yeah,
the thing.
and because
right?
someone tried before that didn't work, and then they came and he did. So I mean, people are gonna do those big crazy things are gonna be a bit delusional, right?
No, that I mean that's there's nothing wrong with that. Like you have to think big, and
Yeah.
but it's as investors we have to. I mean, it's
Yeah.
also our part to do analysis, right? And so if something is like not executable, that's the rationalization. But again, I mean I'm very careful because it's a fine line of killing the drive and motivation
Yeah.
by giving too much advice. You have to kind of balance that, right? You just rationalize where you think there's logic, but always throw the question back to them. What do you think, right? So that's one approach. Again, there's no right or wrong
Yeah,
approach.
and you also have to aim for big problems, right? Because there's so much risk in building these businesses. Along the way, your business model and your execution will define the range of your outcomes and what you build, what you get for your effort, and maybe it'll be less than you expected, but it'll still be something major because you built for a big problem, right, or big opportunity. So
So in Pakistan, what are those big problems that you feel that a lot of entrepreneurs can actually solve? And they can make, say, even if not venture returns, but they can make like serious businesses around them. Like, what are those big thematic areas? So, like, one is digitization, moving from, and or say documentation, moving businesses from, say, undocumented to documented, or say physical commerce to e-commerce, digital acquisition. What That's why we have so many fintechs, right? But what else do you see happening?
I love talking I have a book of one, right? But I can talk my own book because that's what VCs do. But I think agri-tech is a great sector for Pakistan, right?
Agri-tech?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, agriculture is a huge part of the economy. You can't screw it up because too many people depend on it. And if you do
Yeah.
something useful, it'll be valuable here. And if you do something really useful, it'll be valuable elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I'm not trying to be too simplistic in my analysis of Farmdar, but for me, it's 20% of Pakistan's economy, documented and maybe undocumented. It's solving major problems for members of the supply chain who have capital. So that team pivoted pretty quickly from working with farmers to working with people in the supply chain. Good sign for of their acumen as founders. But it's a huge market opportunity. So I think agriculture. I mean, I think there should be more. I think there's more corporate investment in agriculture in this country. I don't know how many venture scale companies there are in there, but I think it's an interesting space. So
Yeah. For us, I mean, this is something I've always said at different firms. Lending is something that really excites us and something that I think is a massive opportunity in Pakistan to solve for.
But lending, like all lending like in BNPL or like consumer SME, like what kind of lending?
I would say both. And let's say our recent investment into Kiss Bazaar, where we see
Yeah.
Arif trying to lend
Yeah.
out to the consumer, because in Pakistan there's no solution for them to be able to go
great
finance
founder, great
these
company.
these solutions, right? And I think how he's been able to solve that, and I think, I mean, he's just hit the tip of the iceberg in what's there. Let's say our co-investment, other financials, right?
Yeah.
You're right. Now they are now getting into, let's say, SMEs lending over there. They're now also trying to use how the banks are lending, and giving them the technology and the know-how to be able to now lend to consumer businesses, your credit card penetration, etc. And the most phenomenal thing about all of this is the NPLs. Both companies have phenomenally no LP. I mean, if you see the numbers of NPL, you'll be absolutely shocked. So, this thing that लोग पाकिस्तान में पैसे लेके भाग जाते हैं, गलत है. Like, you have to really understand that these companies are able to, for them, this money is actually a way of life. It's a way to support themselves as things are getting more expensive and difficult to manage with the limited resources that you have. This is a solution for them, and they're not going to mess it up. So, lending is something that extremely excited about, and something that
And you would continue to invest more in this space?
100% I would. 100% I would. And I think I would also like to look at the logistics space. I feel like there's massive disruption that, can take place. It's just something that's just been done so traditionally, and efficiency really lacks there. So I think that there's some great companies coming out in that space in Pakistan as well.
So, like, before come to Faisal, like, I remember in the middle, like 21, 22, I was thinking of doing my own startup because
Okay,
everyone
nice.
was.
Did you? You never pitched to me, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't really. I just left. I left that pretty early. Like, I wanted to do a Carta or cap table management for Mina.
Oh yeah, no, I remember
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that.
So, but didn't think the market was big enough. And I think one of the important conversations I had was with Rajan, who was doing Sequoia India at that
Okay.
point. And just for advice and everything. And he was like, "Yeah, dekho," like he explained the power law really quickly to me. And he said, "Dekho, Pakistan has these three big spaces where you can actually potentially make venture returns. Like those are big industries, and it was agriculture, fintech, and logistics."
Yeah.
He said these literally are it, right? Anything beyond that, either you go for a global market, or if say Pakistani audience, then it just you can't just build. So, but uh, has your thesis changed a bit? Like, because I feel like, say for example, BookMe, right? Doing phenomenally well, doing so, and I love Faizan generally. I think whenever I've spoken to him, he's been quite insightful. So yeah, so how has your thesis evolved or changing?
Yeah, so Agritech and Farmda's a great team and great companies, but I've lost my shirt twice there. But I approach from different angles, right? So
Okay, yeah.
I'm kind of like
Yeah,
I'm
of
checking
course.
out from that segment. It's not my forte. Everybody's got their
Yeah.
forte. So I love fintech. Again, my portfolio 50% is concentrated in the hybrid, the logistics and the supply chain, the whole gambit, right? And then we're co-investors in multiple deals. Um, so it's the same three verticals, but now let's go down within fintech. I think
Yeah.
fintech. So there's two components that I mean, at least for me going forward, my concentration is slightly changing, right? So I personally think we're at a very fundamental look. The AI buzzword or blockchain might be a bubble, but it's a reality that's going to come and it's going
Yeah.
to disrupt things in every facet of existence, right? Whether it takes 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter, right? That's where it's headed. I think AI agents specifically is something that will solve lots of problems in Pakistan, create efficiency, and it's again whole part of the whole digitization drive, right? Like when you think from let's zoom out, like as venture capitalists, we try to visualize where the world will be 10 years from now. That's typically the life of our
Yeah.
funds,
Yeah.
and hopefully exits happen in 10 years, and you try to work backwards, and hopefully you get it right, right? So we're trying to predict the future to some extent. In my opinion, that particular segment is extremely attractive. And then again, blockchain, which is fintech, it just gets a bad rep with the meme coins and all that. But the actual technology is really, really profound in its sound. And that's actually where the disruption is taking place. And I look at a lot of fintech that we're investing in today, all of us, is actually on ramps to eventually get into that platform. Right? I'm not saying that the dollar or any reserve currency is going away, but there'll be an upgradation of the analog settlement system into the digital. And so now, what would I look at, right? It's like on ramps and basic custodians and things in the region.
Stable coins, maybe. Yeah.
Stable. That a lot of, even like if you look at UAE, right? They've accepted USDT,
Yeah.
and
Vara
a
is
lot
one
of
in
back
big
end stuff is
follow.
happening. Settlement, your remittances, a lot of that stuff is shifting, right? So affiliated technologies within through the blockchain realm, and to me, blockchain is we're in a trust-based internet today, where basically I think it's Mubariz's profile on Facebook, but it could be 10 profiles. Which one is yours? So we have to move to authenticated data, and then once that data is locked, then the AI agents will thrive because then you have more accurate data, right? So it's a combination of that. Again, this is my thesis is still shifting and evolving. I myself am like spending like 3-4 hours a day just trying to understand the pace of change. It's not easy to keep up with this. It's like
Yeah.
every day there's something new, right? So it's like it's not easy to kind of, so until I figure it out, that's the direction I want to head in.
AI agents are going to be huge all around the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and one thing that you're already seeing, and as even some of the people I met in Pakistan are using just AI assisted software development, right? I mean, so
Exactly.
I actually think not to get more comments from our friends across the border, but I think the services business model is really challenged right now because it's just not how many bodies are going to throw at problems when you can have developers be just much more productive. How many
Yeah.
bodies do you need? And
Do,
so
don't you see this AI, let's say agent, even as I mean, this is something what I've been thinking on. Love to hear the group's thoughts on this. Don't you see this as a threat to Pakistan? Because let's say these, you know, call centers we have, they're going to be replaced
Yeah,
now by
Yeah,
these
they
AI. So
will.
in terms of all this massive employment that's been created, I am foreseeing this as being a big threat for the Pakistani economy.
I would turn it around though, right? Pakistan's an insurgent in these markets. They're a newer player. They're a hungrier, more aggressive player. If those companies invest on using those tools better, why shouldn't they take market share from others?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in
Agreed
the
with
end,
you.
that's just kind of what you're going to have to do. You're not.
Yeah.
You don't have the classic innovator's dilemma of being huge players in those markets yet. Maybe you should just do better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying that's going
That's
to
what
happen,
the
and I'm
founders
not.
should be. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to happen, and I'm not saying it's easy to make happen.
Yeah.
But I think that's what companies should be thinking
Yeah.
about.
Absolutely.
It's I mean, to me, I've already harped on this in the previous one. I have a very, very disruptive outlook on what's about to happen, and I think it's going to create a lot of. It's going to change society. It's almost like the way society changed, and the order we're living in that started in 1945. That was all the agrarian to the industrial age, right?
Yeah.
Is that level of a seismic shift that's going to happen with basically AI agents and and I think everything that was happening since 2000, this is kind of the pinnacle of that, right? And so whatever period it takes, you're going to see unemployment. I mean, look, I mean, I'll give you a simple example, right? Like if there's good enough social media tools out there now where you don't need a social media team, so that's one of the teams that I have reduced, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, you're seeing like whether it's a fund admin, they're getting more digital, right? So a lot of the interfaces with banks and all, a lot of the reporting, so you can cut down on the finance department. So I think people will domestically, you'll start to see companies use platforms. I mean, why would if I have 50 people in my accounting department or finance department, if I'm let's say in FMCG, and I get a tool that basically can solve a lot of those problems and do journal entries pretty efficiently, I'll probably like cut down from 50 to 25 at first, test the application, then cut it down to 10, and eventually have like one or two people, right?
So but I'll challenge you on this, in that I think you are blessed with a global perspective and a big picture perspective that allows you to think that way. I think people, and I'm just as again easy for me to say, but I think there's so much labor in Pakistan that people throw labor at problems all the time, and
but not competent. The competent labor is leaving. For,
yeah, but whatever.
it's
But
less
you know,
a problem.
so you know, but if you're going to believe in AI
But I do
agents,
believe like construction, yeah.
yeah.
It's like that labor. I mean,
So my only point would be, I think you're right, but I think if you build with the wrong perspective or without a sense of what's happening globally and being globally competitive, you're going to end up with steampunk. I mean, Pakistan could be and by steampunk, what does that mean? You know, it's like it looks like Victorian England in some places, and it looks like the 21st century in some places.
no,
Right?
by the way, I agree with you 100%. I'm not saying it'll be domestic agents. I think it'll be actually leveraging like agents that are originating
Elsewhere.
out of the US, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because like IFRS, a lot of the, I mean, those type of things you can just literally use. So I was talking about for disruption from a human perspective.
And a macro perspective, right?
yeah,
a big picture perspective.
exactly.
No, that's what I'm saying. But that's a challenge for Pakistan.
Yes, and then the other thing is that look, and this is where I think that I don't think entrepreneurship is going to be an option. Like it's going to be necessary because it's just a simple layoffs, right? Like companies will reduce workforce depending on the job function. I think the white collar worker is actually more under threat than the the blue collar worker in Pakistan, because that's the one where you have like teams of like 10, but really two people are doing the work, and the other 8 are slacking off, right? And eventually, like if I'm a private business owner, I'm gonna be like, you know what? I don't need to have this payroll of these guys. The two efficient ones I'll keep, and I'll basically use some sort of an agent that they manage, AI agent, right? I mean, again, this is speculative, but again, we have to kind of be philosophical to some extent to try to see.
Not
where this is.
speculative. I mean, I have a couple of companies in my current portfolio that are both in different parts of the stack,
Right, okay.
tackling the AI agent opportunity, and it's very powerful. Very, very powerful.
That's
So
good to
there's
hear.
going to be lots of. There's gonna be
So I may be headed in some right path.
Right.
Let's see.
Yeah. No,
I need to pick your brains more.
there's lots of propositions that are really interesting, right? Because in the end, and not to get all historical about it, but any industrial revolution or any revolution drives lots of anxiety about job losses, right? But I think it's sort of a very it's a paternalistic way to say that you should do that dull job because you need a job. In the end, why should somebody be a taxi driver? Why
No, I
should
agree.
somebody
Yeah.
be a scribe? You know, why should somebody do that? It's a bad job. It happens to be a job that pays you a salary now, but it's not a fulfilling job. It's not a safe job in some cases. why should you do those jobs? So I think that's going to be one of the impacts of AI.
It was like, I mean, again, this is just speculative, but I was doing an analysis, right? And I was like, the way the Gulf states, like specifically, like let's take Saudi and UAE, right? These guys are really, really, they're intelligent. They're switched on. They understand what's happening from a governance perspective.
Right.
The speed with which they're moving,
Yeah.
like in 6 years you may see like mandates for autonomously driving vehicles there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to our remittances when a lot of drivers working there are just sent
100%.
back home, right?
100%.
So these are things that as a nation I think we have to start planning for, that things are different now, and we need to, I mean, obviously what may happen in 6 years you want to start thinking about now, right? Countries like Singapore have thrived because they actually have a department that goes and analyzes where things may be in 15 years, right? What type of stresses might be put on the Straits of Malacca that impact Singapore, right? So I hope we start to evolve more forward thinking in Pakistan.
So, with so much changing so fast, what do you think from a policy perspective needs to happen or change from the government of Pakistan level? Abhi bhi, most of the conversation that we have from the government thing, everyone is very, I don't know how genuine it is, but everyone's like IT sector is very important, right? And when they say IT sector, essentially what they're talking about is software export businesses, like basically labor arbitrage businesses, where we're exporting services, and like we just said, it's probably most ripe for disruption and really faster than we can think. Uh, Other countries would obviously be affected by it more, but there's a significant industry. Like right now, I think our IT exports are what, $3 billion dollars a year. So, what would you say from say government policy perspective needs to change?
So look, I mean, again, it's what I feel like there's a complete disconnect. There's the discussions we have in our realm,
Yeah,
and then there's uh, in the government or in general in the old structure. When I say the brick and mortar structure, the mindset is more looking at the world the way it's been from 1971 to, I would say, 2020, and things since then have changed significantly, right? So there's no forward looking um, mindset, and then extrapolating from that how to do things, right? So for example, like multiple people from big business families reached out. They're like, they reach out to me for some reason. I'm like, I have nothing to do with software development,
yeah,
and they're like, let's get together and set up a software development shop, right?
yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not something I want to go into, because I do think eventually, I mean, sure, for the next 5 years you've got a gap, but eventually it'll get disrupted to some extent, right? So I think it's more proactive analysis. And again, I'll just go back to the more perspective from a policy. The policymakers themselves have to understand, not just wait for the IMF or World Bank or OECD Common Reporting Standards to come in with a danda and tell you this is what your policy should be. We should proactively be thinking of that policy and not reactively. So that's just my 2 cents.
And I think I would really like, I think coming back again, because software export is such a big element of the government strategy, I think that I would, and they have a seat on the table. I would also like for venture and the startup place to also have a seat on the table, so at least they can also hear what we are trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. Um, I think, at least to the credit, we had just recently done a roadshow for the Punjab government in China right now.
yeah.
I definitely saw a lot of willingness over there to learn what's happening in China. How is it that we can get those players to come and consider Pakistan as a place to relocate to, as they look at geographically relocating or into expansion as well. So at least I was happy to see that within the willingness. But I would also, I think we can play a very important part in the economy of Pakistan, and I think it would be nice to have at least one of us have a seat on the table to be able to give our point of view.
But in terms of say, I mean, maybe you can speak about this more as well, Ammar. Like in terms of regulating crypto, I think AI is still too early to figure out
Yeah.
what exactly to regulate around it. But in terms of regulating crypto, what can countries like Pakistan, like what kind of like we've seen multiple approaches across the globe, right? There's obviously the China approach, which is on one end of the spectrum, which is just ban everything, and then there is your Singapore or say your Estonia approach, which is on the other end. Where do you think Pakistan is best suited to take advantage of something like crypto, which is uh, like rapidly changing and there's a lot of value creation that's happening on that front as well, right?
I'll give Ammar a chance, and then
Yeah.
there's some stuff I'm privy to. I'll share.
Yeah, no, I think Faisal should answer this question because it's really something that I spend. We have an investment that's sort of in the personal investment space that helps people invest in different alternative assets, where crypto is one. We've done some things around blockchain, looking at stable coins and what stable coins can do. Um, just from my naive perspective, and I say that with all candor, I think the more you make regulation transparent, effective, in line with global standards, the more you can make your business processes more efficient using whether it's blockchain or stable coins or other things to enhance payments, remittances. Taking transaction costs out of something helps everyone, right? So
Yeah.
if you can think about it that way, I think those are the things I would think about. That's what I would tell you about crypto. I think generally the government has thinks about software exports, going back to the earlier discussion, as a remittances play, and that's back to people as labor. And I think in the end, that is a very small part of the tech world, and that
Yeah.
is. And when I look at, again, talking to entrepreneurs, their challenges are that people can do very well and have fantastic, very low taxes if they go work for somebody offshore or become a freelancer. And so, why work for a product company and work hard and take risk and make less money? So, it's our job as venture capitalists and entrepreneurs to deliver returns. So people want to work for product companies, but the government is incenting people to be short term and be just software developers, outsource software developers. And I worry about that. That's not a great setup. So, sorry, two different questions, two different answers.
No,
But
no, but
crypto,
it was very relevant in what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
But I should have said this right from the beginning because I keep getting slack. Like I say something and it doesn't happen a week later, and people are like, "Look, you were wrong." I'm like, mentally, I live in 2030. So for me, like a 3 to 6 year paradigm, I
Our
have to ask.
episodes also come out a few months later,
Yeah,
like a
so-
couple of months, but
and
like
people
not
like,
in
he said,
2030.
yeah, exactly. So I have to ask my wife, like, what year is it right now? Like sometimes when I'm coming back to the reality, right? So look, let's come back to crypto. What's the main issue, right? So like to me, crypto is there's two components: a technology, but it's also a macro event. And so a lot of the exposure people are taking in cryptos for a real reason, which is loss of purchasing power, right?
Yeah.
Historically, that would have first gone into gold, which is basically institutional, smart money, and because information is never symmetric, right? So smarter people figure out their position, and then when gold goes to a high value,
That's when everyone
then
else
people
comes.
go for poor man's gold, which is silver, which
Yeah.
and so if you take Bitcoin and then all the other cryptos, I would say Bitcoin is behaving like digital gold, and then all the other cryptos, even though some of them have use cases, most of them don't have use cases. Um, it's just speculations to make money. So we're in the speculative phase we've been in, and then eventually the actual use cases and adoption phase will come, right? And Ammar, I'm sure you invested in that space, so you understand this element. Then now let's come back to Pakistan, right? So Pakistan is a net, we're basically not the best governed country. Your currency is valuation is directly it reflects your governance standard,
Yeah.
basically, right? That's we all started at 1 to 1 effectively, right? 1947, and then the rupees devalued since then. So their main concern is capital controls, right? And so, and this and I can say that because I've stated this even in 2017 when they created a committee. I passed this comment there. Um, it's the foreign currency manual. Neither the state bank wants to opine on this, nor the SECP.
Yeah.
The exchange is the SECP, and there's a foreign currency manual element also, which
Yeah.
is capital controls, right? And so, if you allow people to basically, directly, um, you know, take exposure and withdraw crypto, everyone and their mother are going to basically take the wallet and go send it
They're already
overseas,
doing
right?
it, right? You just mentioned how the
So
third
so
largest.
so look, that's about the quantum is that number I've calculated. It's about 4.5% of the population, right?
Yeah.
It's but obviously we're big, so it's like a quantum, right? Like
It's a
we're
huge
like
amount,
yeah.
4.5% is big, yeah.
So but again, so their justification, and when I say they, it's like the policy makers, right? Is that look, I mean, people also 4% might be using cocaine and drugs, right?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean we legalize it, right? So and that'll always happen, right? There's a quantum of that. There is a solution, and the solution is created a gated exchange. So that element, people will always, if you have debasement, people will find a way to preserve their wealth because it's a human need, right? And so give them exposure. Exposure is the issue, right? To create a gated exchange, you can buy and sell, but you can't withdraw. that allows you, and then you can have a custodian regulated by the central bank, where basically to ensure, and then Binance has all these options where you can actually use their liquidity and rehypothecation. So all those elements already exist. And I think there's more interest now, especially this year. But for some reason, that always comes when Bitcoin's pumping. And when
Yeah.
the market rolls over, then the interest disappears, right?
Yeah.
So I think they should consider that. The other thing is stable coins also, because a lot of the younger generation, especially if you're counting on remittance,
Yeah.
once they go out of go outside Pakistan, they do take exposure, right? And so it's easier for a lot of them just to send it back in USDC or USDT.
Yeah.
So again, that's something they should consider. And like I'm more of a proponent of USDC versus USDT because of the some of the audit issues on the other side, but it's a form of foreign reserve if you have it, right. And a lot of the new settlement platforms and exchange platforms are starting to use that in like actual real world use cases, right. So I think that's our adoption. But again, this is just my
So
perspective.
government of Pakistan is better suited to regulating these exchanges, and uh, I mean, in my experience, people will come and sign up, even if it means that they enforce the same capital controls on these things, similar capital controls, and say link it to FBR, pay tax on it as well. And I think I mean, India did that, and that's more of a win-win for
It's a
everyone.
huge windfall,
Yeah.
tax windfall. So why would you not do that? It's I mean it's and it's a bearer's asset, right? Crypto or Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever you want. So their concern is the same as gold. That once you get a hold of it, the value is in your hand, and then you can take it. And in this case, it's actually tougher to take it out if you're legitimate and going on a plane.
Yeah.
Like they check your suitcases before you're going out. But in terms of in crypto, the wallet just is very easy to transmit out, right? So that needs to be
Not
addressed.
so much money leaves Pakistan anyway. Like all your hawala, all your.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we
Well,
have a
it's actually
huge
most of
informal
it's leaving on USDT, by the way, now.
Yeah.
Even though they've cracked down on the Hawala, it's like, I mean, if literally you go out there, you can actually find just like money changers, you can find like take cash and USDT and then basically the money sent out. So
Yeah.
it's,
But better to regulate it and
yeah,
have
they
legit wallets
should.
so that people have regulated business to work with. But what about you? Now, so you guys also, one thing that I also want your opinion on, so from a policy perspective and a regulatory perspective is, you've both done local funds as well, right? Pakistan, mein you've registered with the SECP, PVC license. How easy or difficult was that process, and what needs to really change there?
Um, for so the process was long.
Okay.
It did take some time for us to do it, and I think in terms of change, I would say that I'm happy that there's a framework that exists for us to kind of create these local funds and then to be able to use them to solve a big problem. So I'm really happy about that. I think whereas where I would like to see some changes, at least on the LPA part, is
Yeah.
that we feel the SECP likes to kind of put in be involved in the commercial arrangements, what we
Yeah.
don't see outside.
Yeah.
Let's say in all the LPAs that we have, it's more of a commercial agreement between us and our investors, and we come to an agreement, and an agreement is made, and then we submit it to the regulator. Uh, Pakistan has set agreements made, and we have to go by them. They might be different from our agreements that perhaps our investors are okay with. So this one change that I would like is that let those commercial agreements be between fund manager and investor. 100% you should definitely be looking out for the investor and the investor's interest, and that's why they're there. But there's just some certain commercial arrangements which I think should be discussed uh, between the fund manager and the investor, and that's
More
a certain change.
flexibility on that
Yes.
front. Yeah.
I'll echo that because my experience was similar in the first fund that was a local
Yeah.
fund. I mean, look, the whole ethos of how these laws were written was like mutual funds, and
Yeah.
so it's very different, right? This is like you and they tax your management fee. I mean, it's already so difficult to run a fund globally, like unless you're running $100 million fund and above. It's with all the KYC, AML, CFT compliance requirements, it's not easy to run a fund anymore. So, and if a smaller fund, right? So I think they need to take that into consideration.
Yeah, and there's a double tax element, which is
Yeah,
also kind of
exactly. Yeah,
ridiculous
that's the other one,
on
right?
the returns, and you have to pay tax first, and then again when you're paying the distribution to the LPs, etc. Last question. I know we're kind of over time,
Nice.
but last question, and this is more of a something I've asked the other VCs who've been here as well, like the Pakistani VCs, is so you're stuck in a prison some random country in the world. You can only make one phone call to one founder from your portfolios. Who are you calling?
Why don't you go first?
You know, I have an Indian founder I've backed who is a very street smart, repeat entrepreneur, and I would trust him to figure out how to get me out of prison because he's just done it again, and he'll be again. And you know, I have other great founders in my portfolio, but that's the one who comes to mind because I think he's
What's his name?
Kiran.
Kiran.
Yeah, so that's what I would say, and that's just my own take. A good guy.
I'm calling Danish, man.
He's Danish Lakhani.
Yeah, that's
I'm like, in the sense that I know he's got the muscle to get me out of trouble. So otherwise, I'd call like Faizan, like Umar from Postex or Habal. But you know, like it's.
You're like going for the guy
I
who has the
mean,
leverage.
if you're saying I only have one phone call,
You have one phone call.
and I'm
yeah.
like, and clearly I've done something wrong,
No, of course, yeah. Or even if you haven't.
or I'm in
Yeah.
trouble, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like.
Yeah,
I gotta-
Danish would probably be the quickest to get to
But
the
and he's
ambassador
al-
of that country.
and he's also very helpful as a person.
Yeah,
It's,
100%, 100%. What about you, Naiel?
I think keeping that in mind, you know what you said. I think I would.
you'd call Ali.
Yeah, I would 100% call Ali. That would always be my first
He's
call.
not your portfolio.
But
yeah.
but if it's a portfolio company, I would Rafi, who is the founder of Facet.
Oh, yeah,
I think
Yeah.
how he's gone about building his licensing across different geographies. I know he has the skill set to negotiate a good deal for me. He's been working with regulators and all these guys in different geographies. So I think my call would be to Rafi.
There you go.
Perfect. There you go. We know who you guys think are some of the most resourceful people in your portfolios. But anyway, thank you so much for taking the time, guys. Really appreciate it. I feel like we got quite a few insights out of this, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you
So
for
thanks for having us.
Mubariz.
Thanks.
Thank
Enjoyed
you.
it very much.
Lovely.
Thanks.